set a kind of framework of like what's sort of going on in the background that might.
والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah. Alright, guys, today we're going to be doing something a little different. We've got Outlier AI doing a guest speak, which is going to be basically an update on all the new headlines, all the AI news that's coming out, and all the new updates. So, this guy, mashallah, he should take care of the introduction and everything, and we're going to be having a good, informative AI news update. So, uh, just some housekeeping things, real quick. Make sure everything's working well, and then we'll hop in this DevLands and listen to them for a little bit while they talk about what's up. So, may Allah make everything easy, and Bismillah.
Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Tim.
Lovely. Yes, definitely second that. Okay, so I want to provide some framing of what has been going on historically. So right now we're looking at a graph by this research organization called Meter, and what they do is they have a suite of tasks that they have a decent sense of how long it takes a human to do. And then when, state-of-the-art models come out, they test models on that suite of tasks, and then they're able to say basically how long of uninterrupted human work by like a competent human in the field can a model take on autonomously. Even if the model takes more or less time to complete that human work, what they're measuring is the human amount of
Just a
time.
quick review.
And they look at,
We built our
again, kind
first
of
main
a
branch.
wide range of
We
tasks
added,
and also
we
the success rate. Because, models,
removed,
they
we
don't do the
reverted.
same thing exactly
We
every
learned
time,
how
so
to
they have to
get
take
rid
multiple
of
measurements of
stage
what's
files,
going on.
modified files,
Anyway,
move things from the stash
they
with
have
pop,
a graph that's definitely worth
and
following for any like state-of-the-art
then
model
we created a
outputs. But I
branch,
want to go over
and then we
what's been
merged the
going on
branches,
since
and then
OpenAI
we created tags,
started releasing
and
GPT-2.
we can
Not,
even
I guess
those.
GPT-1's
Okay,
not on here, but as you can
so let's
see,
get it.
over time there's been on a log scale what is a linear trend. So if you looked at it on a linear scale, it would be an exponential trend. But it's much easier to extrapolate this way. So you can see that over time, the state-of-the-art models have been increasing pretty steadily and how long they can do work uninterrupted. And it's the same trend whether you use like a more permissive 50% success rate or a stricter 80% success rate. It just changes what's on the y-axis. I'm going to use 50% for a reason you'll see in a minute. But you can see that Claude Opus 4.6, which is the last model they released, is able to do about tasks that take a competent human 10 hours with big error bars at 50% success rate. And you can also see how fast this trend is extrapolating. Yeah, I see a couple comments already coming in. Example of a distraction. I don't know what that means. Feel free to clarify though. So the important metric to think about here is the what's called the doubling time. Basically, how long it takes for the amount of time, or sorry, the duration or the time horizon you might call it to double. And so according to this line, the doubling time is like 4 or 5 months, I think. So that means, if Claude was released in February and it can do 10 hours roughly, then I guess it's early April right now. So maybe in June or maybe July, something like that, you might expect 20 hours. So that's what the sort of like canonical meter graph is telling us. But actually, let me answer this comment before I move on to this sort of sequel.
So basically,
Seems
what we're
like the
doing here
shelf
is
life
kind
of
of like
human evaluation
we
tasks is
branched,
becoming
we
increasingly
merged,
visible. As AI capabilities
we're
expand
branching, we're
exponentially, how
merging.
do you see the
We're
role
gonna
of human
reach back.
raters
We're gonna
evolving
say,
and
all right,
potentially
guys,
becoming obsolete?
This
we
is
have
where
a
we're working
scale. I'm
together
going to
now.
get to that on
All
the
that stuff
third page
before us,
related to
inshallah.
this about
It's gonna
sort of
be in
how the tasks can keep
past.
up. But
But
actually,
let's make it
you
work.
can even see it in here, like as
Rebase.
the points on this graph go up, the error bars get bigger and bigger. And that's because it's frankly very difficult. It's like becoming exponentially more difficult, in fact, to get tasks that sort of measure the model's capabilities precisely. Anyway, that's the meter graph. Now, if you take the same data and you break it into two different trends, you see a faster growth, shorter doubling time. So the rationale for this break here is that the models beforehand were not reasoning models. Like if you basically all the models, the leading models nowadays are reasoning or thinking models where they sort of have very long chains of thought before they decide like, okay, I'm ready to respond. O1 was the first of those reasoning models. Now, again, everyone has it. But that's what this break is for. So it's a reasonable break to draw. And if you decide to go that way, the doubling time drops to about 103 days. That's still not super intuitive. So someone commented here, which I literally liked it, but also I thought was good for this crowd. It's a little bit abstract or maybe harder to grasp. 105 days for doubling means 10x a year. So again, if you go back to, it's a little easier to see on this graph. If we think that Claude Opus 4.6, which was released in February 2026, can do 10 hours of human work autonomously at 50% success rate, or maybe 1 hour at 80% success rate, if we want to be more strict, then by February 2027, those numbers will have 10x'd. So by that time, there will be some model that can do 10 hours of human work autonomously at 80% success rate. So that's over a whole workday. So that should really change how we think about how models will work and how we'll work with them. So the model gets distracted. I don't remember saying that. I'm sorry. I'm gonna catch up on some of these comments. So looking at this curve, it seems like the shelf human. Yeah. I will get to that on the
Now we're
third
on this feature
point.
branch.
We understand that a long model can work
the head
before
block
issues
moved to
arise
feature.
at 50% success rate. Yeah, so basically what they mean by the success rate is, again, models are probabilistic, so even if you give it the same task twice, you might get different results. And so it's not a, I think distraction is a little bit too much of a human term. What's happening when they fail is that they might make a wrong choice and not be able to recover. Models are not always able to pull back, like take a step back in the same way that humans are. Like error recovery is definitely something that all the model builders are working on. And sometimes
Same.
what you need, the feedback that you need is not accessible to models. So one reason that vibe coding works so well is that when you make a mistake or you're calling an API wrong, whatever, you get feedback from the environment that says like, hey, this didn't work, or here's a stack trace of like there's an error at this point. And so that allows the agent to work very iteratively. But many things are not like that, where the feedback needs to come from another person or is much more qualitative or fuzzy. And so those tasks are going to be harder for agents to really self-improve on. I think coding, again, is very amenable to that sort of feedback cycle, that iteration cycle, but also all of the labs want like autonomous AI researchers in-house as soon as possible to speed up their own progress. So they're also, for their own reasons, kind of incentivized to focus on code. Yes, the role humans can play, we'll see. Yeah. Some of these are a little bit further off topic. I want to address the human part first. So there are definitely still benchmarks where models are much lower down on progress. One of them is ours. So it's called the Remote Labor Index. Basically,
Remote labor
do
index.
they have screenshots? That always makes it easier.
So like how much people use AI when they try to work from home.
Let me give you a more intuitive graph. So basically, the idea of remote labor index is what actual human work that's like purely computer done, it doesn't require the real world, uh, can models do that humans actually pay other humans to do right now. So you can see these are projects you might actually source from a place like Upwork or Fiverr or things like that. And this benchmark from Scale, let me group these for easy future reference if needed. It's pretty tough. So the scoring here is absolute. So if you basically hit all of the project deliverables, you get credit for that project, and if you don't get credit. And so the best scoring model is Opus 4.6. It only gets about 4% on this benchmark. So there, in many domains, is still a long way to go. I don't have actually a good sense. I'm sure it's reported, but I don't have a good sense for how long some of these projects should take. So I think more stuff like this, where it's a more complete encapsulation of work rather than a very strict of like, if you're familiar with programming, like elite code style,
that
like,
actually
oh,
does
this is
something.
just increasingly difficult, but isn't actually reflective of more highly compensated, let's say, work. I think both are valuable axes of progress, like the sort of IQ test version, and also like the sort of real world employee version. But the latter, the real world employee, it tends to lag further behind because it doesn't just depend on raw intelligence. It also depends on some sort of organizational or tacit knowledge, and also taste in some cases, being able to follow instructions that may be incomplete, leave some things implicit, occasionally contradictory, but there's a good way to resolve that contradiction, things like that. And also things that take a long time. Models are still not very good at following like very long time horizon tasks. Clearly, they're making progress, as we saw on the original meter graph, but they still have a long way to go in cases where you have to, flip between a lot of tools. You have to keep a sort of working memory in mind across tons and tons of steps. So to answer the question about sort of where do humans factor in, one, I do think there is still a ways to go on just very deep domain knowledge. I'm sure that everyone here who's an expert in some field has encountered something wrong that an AI has said about their work, even if they've been very impressed by its knowledge sort of over time. So I do think there's still progress to be made on this sort of like raw intelligence axis, but also I think having like the sort of ways of working and knowing how to check your own work and make those corrections, like what sources to look at and what outputs to kind of test
Rule of thumb:
when,
only
setting
rebase
yourself up a
locally.
plan, what order of
Only do that
operations to
rebasing
do.
stuff on your
That stuff,
home
I think
repo.
models
When
still
you
need
push it
quite a
to
lot
the
of help
public
on.
repo, you're probably best to
Okay.
be careful with the changes in your commit
This is
IDs.
not
But
related to
if
what
you
I was
rebase in your
talking about,
local
but
and then
someone
you
asked what
push
the
your
adoption
local
rate of
to
LLMs is
the
currently.
public,
It's
does it
still pretty
not come
low.
with
I
the
think,
new IDs?
OpenAI has, I think, hundreds of millions of users, maybe let's say a billion. And the Anthropic user base is, I'm sure it's
Interactive
just a
rebase.
subset of the OpenAI user base. Gemini probably has some distinct users compared to OpenAI, but well under half of the world
Speaking of
has
AI and
touched
Claude and
AI in any
OpenAI,
form, is my guess. So there's still a long way to
their
go. And if you've even
Anthropic
heard
code
of
got leaked,
Anthropic, that's puts you in
and
like a
now
pretty
there's like
small minority of
free,
people around the world. So
like
sometimes it's easy to
rewritten
forget for people
versions of
who are sort of
Cloud.
living and breathing this every day, like me.
There's posted
Okay, I'm catching up
for
on
the
some of the
public
Q&A.
in, I think,
Not all the
Ruby and
models in scope
Python.
for this graph access the web
I think it's
live.
on GitHub.
I
Mashallah.
actually don't
Open
know
source.
offhand about the web access. It's kind of an expectation nowadays. For any like practical work tasks that you might have a model do, I think web access should be part of the testing suite. If you're doing a more like IQ type test, like Scale has another one called Humanities Last Exam. This one, uh, they last I checked, they do like tool use on and tool use off versions, and the tool use off, where you just sort of have to, the LLM is sort of like in a room metaphorically rather than able to search the web and stuff, always scores lower. So, it's good to score both, but for the project-based ones like RLI, I would say,
So we
why
still
would
got
you
like
restrict the web access?
10
That
minutes
seems
to
like
follow.
handicapping.
I'll do 15.
Related to task duration due to the context window size. Oh, yeah. This is a good follow-on question. So the question, I'll just read it out loud. Is there any data that relates the task duration data to the context window size of the models? So I don't know offhand from these benchmarks, but that is one limitation of models that labs are working on is, in case you don't know, the context window is basically how much stuff the model can keep in its sort of working memory at any one time. And for leading models nowadays, it's like 128,000 tokens to now more recently with Opus, and also Gemini has this. They can do 1 million tokens. And a token is like 3/4 of a word on average. So that's a lot of information. I mean, if it was just like conversation between two people, that would be tons of text. But what happens is the context window fills up with mostly a lot of like tool use stuff and like exploring around. So if you're doing, again, like vibe coding, for example, there's going to be a lot of tokens taken up with like exploring the code base, testing out, and like iterating to fix stuff. And, human minds are able to sort of very fluidly kind of pick up and discard that information of like, uh, if you did kind of a side task and now you sort of have the main
Commits,
result that you
branches,
needed, your brain is
and
pretty good at
merges.
sort of like forgetting
Reset.
that stuff
Oh,
rapidly and
look back.
keeping the main things in mind. Models don't have a natural way to do that. The context window is just like sort of first in, first out. So without any sort of compensation for that, if you have like an initial topic that you put at the very top of your chat, the model will sort of lose sight of it once that passes out of the context window. Now, the model makers, this is like intrinsic to LLMs. They've been aware of this for a very long time. So they have many ways to compensate for this. If you've ever used Claude Code or Codex or anything like that, like an agentic coding thing, one
Yeah, we
technique
just
they
want to
use
look at
is
what the code looks like
compaction,
it commit to,
where they
but
just
we
say
don't
like,
want
okay,
to
we're getting
reset.
close to the end of the context window.
Okay.
We're going to
Hit
go
switch.
back, kind of
Detach.
summarize what was important, and then start a new chat where that summary is kind of at the top, and then we'll proceed. And that throws out a lot of the intermediate results that are no longer important. Another way that people are starting to do this is to delegate that work out to what are called sub-agents. So the typical setup is you have your orchestrator, which is like the model that you're actually talking to, and that sort of helps to keep the long-term goal in mind and the user's wishes in mind. And then the orchestrator decides to like delegate work out to the sub-agents of like, okay, the
Talking about
user
agency
wants
control.
this bug patch, like sub-agent, you go and patch it. Or if it's like a research task, or you need to write a report or something, one sub-agent will research this topic, another one will research this other topic, a third sub-agent will like take the notes and try to clean them up into a draft or whatever. And that allows the orchestrator to focus again on the high level goals and adjusting for the human's wishes. Kind of like, a manager would with their direct reports, where the manager gets to have this sort of higher level vision going on. Okay. Oh, this scrolled automatically. Damn. I want to pick up on a couple other things related to this sort of continuing progress and this scaling wall that we're really not hitting. But let me see if there's any other chats related to this. Okay, I'm going to pause on the comments for a sec and talk about some models that are continuing this path. So there have been a couple leaks or accidental publishings from Anthropic, which is kind of funny because they focused so much on security recently. But anyway, one of the leaks they had was this blog post, which was going to go out, but had not been officially published. It got accidentally published very briefly, so someone scraped it, which is why it has this weird background and web address, but Anthropic did confirm that this model is coming. So Anthropic is about to release a model that's like a tier up from Opus. If you're not familiar with Anthropic's offerings, sorry, currently their top tier model is called Opus. Then they have another like sort of mid tier one called Sonnet, and then kind of a low tier one called Haiku. And for reference, the different sizes, the parameter sizes for those, very roughly like order of magnitude. People think that Opus is in the trillion parameter neighborhood, that Sonnet is in the 100 billion parameter neighborhood, and Haiku is in the 10 billion parameter neighborhood. So kind of extrapolating that out, people think Mythos is going to be in the 10 trillion parameter neighborhood. And so Anthropic talks in here about how it was so expensive to train, it's going to be so expensive to support use on it, but it's also like a step change. And they don't provide any graphs or anything interesting in here. It's a very brief post, but basically they say it's like radically better than Opus, and it takes a ton of work to serve, and also it's going to cause a lot of security problems, so we want to roll it. Which is very believable because there's been a lot of security problems recently. That's, I'm sure, due to the AIs getting better at offense than they are at defense.
Because it's going to be like a longer...
The Anthropic side of like continuing that sort of push onto this graph, like those are going to be the next
dots here. We'll do 16, inshallah.
On the OpenAI side,
and then we'll just
this article bundles 2 news items, but people wanted to hear about both of them. So the code name for OpenAI's next version that I think will be on par with Mythos is Spud.
I don't know what
the official name will be. It could be GPT-6. They could try a different naming structure, like they had the sort of
like only post to the
we'll see. They're not very good at naming anyway, so I'm not sure it matters.
Like DevLands, and then
but this will
let the stream keep going on.
I think in the near future.
The outlier, just so we can talk about it. Inshallah.
Sora is their
inshallah.
Video generation model, and the big news is that
Mythos,
the dedicated
Anthropic
social network, like basically TikTok competitor, but just for Sora created videos, shut down after I guess less than a year after the debut of the Sora 2 model. It's confusing because Sora is the name of the now defunct social network and also the still operating video generation model. But the main thing going on here is that OpenAI is cutting a lot of what they are calling their side quests and just refocusing on achieving super intelligence as fast as possible, and also I think paying more attention to the coding use case, because Anthropic has been making a ton of money off that and growing, I think at this point, faster than OpenAI because of the coding thing. My personal view is that GPT 5.4 is better than Opus 4.6 at coding, but I also think Anthropic easily has it in them to take that lead back. Okay, so that's it for the sort of what's going to be pushing that envelope forward. Now I want to return to some of the comments. You mentioned the models are still failing. Can you describe a scenario from engineering domain where they don't perform well?
The fact that OpenAI actually has competitors
not easily offhand.
Impressive to
me.
I
don't have experience that could fill in here. But again, the biggest issue is cases where it's hard for the models to get feedback and be able to iterate. Like if you use a coding agent, even the best model on like the highest thinking option, it definitely does not get everything right the first time. But because coding is like can be kind of sandboxed and also has this like very rich feedback environment, it can just like keep trying things, and it's persistent enough and clever enough to figure things out. But there's plenty of stuff in engineering where the simulations either don't exist or can only get you so far, and when you have to get your hands on the real thing and it's time intensive or expensive or requires a human in the loop, the iteration loops are going to be much slower, of course, but also that training data will be much harder to get or impossible to get, and so it's going to be weaker there as well. So I do think, kind of extrapolating here, that you're going to see coding abilities sort of like pulling away more and more from other STEM abilities, let's say. And also, labs will be very interested in any effort that can make some problem look more like coding. So someone asked about, a couple people submitted about like progress on math, I think, because there's been some recent news items. Actually, we have one covered here where, you know, OpenAI, some internal model helped or maybe completely solved 3 different Erdos problems. It potentially has solved a couple Erdos problems before. And people are working on making math look a lot more like programming, where it can provide feedback on the errors and you can iterate much more instead of just like, here's a proof, now I give
so
it to
simple.
a
I thought it was
mathematician
gonna be red
to
and
review.
green.
It like marks it up and returns the errors. So if you're familiar with this field at all, there's a programming language called Lean 4 that allows you to program in mathematical proofs, and that will return you like rich errors about, okay, like this statement is invalid, or we haven't actually proved this, whatever. So that's a case where a domain has been more programming like and allows it to progress much faster. Okay, I want to catch up more on the comments. You think if models could speak to a user
Alright,
more
guys, so
naturally and give a truly
just a
unbiased
quick
response, there would be more
look
interest in using
that
these models?
we covered
Well,
today,
it's very
the
speculative.
move and
I also
remove,
think that
and we
models
covered
are pretty
rebasing.
unbiased
So
in the first place.
we
There
also
actually is
kind
a
of
bit
know
of
how
even
to move our
evidence
head around
that
and look,
models
but we need to be careful when we're
are
doing that so as
good
not to
at,
lose our
like,
progress.
not
It still should
de-radicalizing
exist,
people
but
exactly,
just
but
be hard to
moving
find.
people more towards consensus views,
And
which I think
next
on net is
episode,
good.
inshallah, we're gonna
Obviously,
jump right
there are some
into actual DevLands. This was
consensus
just a
views that
Git
are wrong.
tutorial. DevLands
Most
is
of them
gonna
we
be
just don't
like
know that they're wrong yet,
a world
right?
where we can actually use Git.
But I think on net, for the things that people are talking to models about, that's probably a good thing. So yeah, I think I don't agree with the premise of this question. Between Pentagon and Anthropic, why did you choose Anthropic? Okay, let's talk about this since I'm at kind of a good stopping point. So there's a source that I recommend reading pretty generally. This guy,
Ask AI for help if you need it.
He has a Substack that's at this address. It's called
It's built
Don't Worry
in.
About the Vase. I don't know why. He follows a ton of AI stuff and writes an incredible amount. I don't know how he does it. But this, I thought, was he's done a good job keeping up with the Anthropic versus Department of War stuff. He's definitely on Anthropic's side, so if you're taking a more neutral or more Department of War based side, you'll probably be upset at what you're reading. But my personal view, since you asked, is that the Department of War is like completely in the wrong here. Even companies like, say, TikTok or DeepSeek or something that like are obviously related to the CCP don't get the supply chain risk designation, and I don't think it'll hold up at all.
I didn't even like realize this window.
In addition to being
that's
a wrong thing for the government to do, but it was very threatening to Anthropic. And the original tweet where it was like, if you work with Anthropic, you can't get government contracts. That would have been a death knell immediately for Anthropic, because Anthropic, you know, it gets all its compute from
He'll wrap up soon, inshallah.
Google, Amazon, Microsoft, whatever, the big, maybe Oracle, the cloud players. And if those companies would never risk the government work to be able to support Anthropic. So that level of like arbitrariness, I think, just very bad for predictability, which is what, you know, businesses are built on. I also think Anthropic was really not asking for anything that crazy. Yeah, I don't think that, you know, that they're hippies trying to end all war by like getting Claude in control of it and preventing killing or anything. I think they don't want Claude or any AI in the kill chain, which I think is very reasonable. That should be at the discretion of humans about whether we're going to take someone else out. And yeah, I mean, the agreement that OpenAI ended up signing with the Department of War was also not that different. So I think Anthropic and the Department of War could have gotten there, and there's some like behind the scenes drama that you can read in this particular edition of the newsletter. I think Anthropic, it's already in a lot, it powers a lot of like the Palantir products, for example. Like, they're very willing to work with the American government and Department of War in a lot of cases, but I just don't know. I don't know why they lashed out like this. Okay. Catching up on more comments. RLI demonstrates that frontier AI systems are increasingly evaluated on economically valuable end-to-end work rather than isolated subskills. I would say it's both, but the second category is growing much more relatively. Does this shift elevate the importance of deployment time control, since practical labor substitution requires not only task competence but also sustained operation within authorized, auditable, and policy compliant boundaries?
In order to like
I
keep
don't
this video
understand some of
short,
the
I'm gonna like
adjectives on here,
I'm gonna end the stream
but
inshallah, and then
yes, I
post this
think
video to YouTube.
broadly you're going to
Then we'll come
see
back for just to
more
finish this inshallah.